The war room fell silent as the holographic display showed another star system turning red. Ambassador Velcor watched the light fade with 3 of his 4 eyes, while the 4th tracked the reactions of the council members around him. 17 systems lost in 3 cycles. Billions dead. The Vrick swarm was unstoppable. "We cannot continue like this," Commander Thess of the Gorath spoke, his massive frame trembling with barely contained rage. "My warriors die by the thousands. We throw our best soldiers at them and still they come." Velcor knew the Gorath commander was right. Every species in the Galactic Council had sent their finest warriors. The crystalline ETH could generate plasma shields strong enough to hold back small armies. The Gorath stood 3 meters tall and could tear through solid steel with their bare hands. The telepathic Minari could coordinate battle strategies across entire planets without speaking a single word. Yet none of it mattered against the Vricks. The insects came in waves that blotted out the stars. They felt no fear, showed no mercy, and never retreated. When one died, 10 more took its place. They consumed everything in their path, converting organic matter into more soldiers for their endless swarm. Every victory against them was temporary. Every defeat was permanent. "There must be something we haven't tried," High Curator Minos said, her telepathic voice echoing in everyone's minds. "Some weapon, some strategy, some ally we have overlooked." Velcor had been thinking about this for weeks. There was one option. One terrible option that nobody wanted to mention. But desperation made cowards into heroes and forced impossible decisions. He straightened his crystalline body and spoke. "There is one species we have not asked for help." The room erupted in protest. Everyone knew exactly which species he meant. Earth, the quarantined world, the planet of endless war. "You cannot be serious," Thess growled. "The humans are savages. We quarantined them for good reason." Velcor pulled up Earth's file on the main display. The numbers were staggering. In their recorded history, humans had fought over 15,000 wars. They had killed more of their own kind than the Vricks had killed of all the galactic species combined. Their weapons were crude but horrifyingly effective. Their tactics were brutal beyond comprehension. They had nearly destroyed their own planet 3 times with nuclear weapons before finally achieving some measure of peace. "I have studied their history extensively," Velcor said quietly. "Every species in this room has a warrior culture. But humans? They are different. They don't just have warriors. They have war itself woven into their very nature. That is exactly why we must not involve them," Minos argued. "They are too dangerous, too unstable. What happens when they turn those weapons on us?" "Then we die by human hands instead of Vrick's mandibles," Velcor replied. "At least we would have tried everything." The debate lasted for hours. Some council members wanted to increase their own military production. Others suggested retreating to fortified worlds and hoping the Vricks would eventually stop expanding. But as the holographic map showed more systems under attack, the truth became unavoidable. They were losing. Without help, the Galactic Council would fall within 5 cycles. The vote was close, but desperation won. They would contact Earth. The message reached Earth 3 weeks later. President Hassan sat in his office reading the translated document for the 5th time. Around him stood the highest-ranking members of the United Terran government, all wearing the same expression of disbelief. "They want our help," General Park said, shaking her head. "The same aliens who quarantined us and called us barbarians now want us to fight their war." "They are desperate," Hassan replied. "According to this, they are facing extinction." Defense Minister Kovac leaned forward, studying the information about the Vrick swarm. "This enemy is significant. Hive mind, rapid reproduction, no fear response. This is a total war scenario." Hassan knew what that meant. Total war was something humanity understood better than any species in the galaxy. During the Unification Wars, Earth had seen the worst of what humans could do to each other. Entire cities reduced to rubble. Weapons that should never have been created unleashed on civilian populations. Soldiers pushed beyond every limit of human endurance until they broke or became something else entirely. The wars had ended only 5 years ago. Earth was still rebuilding, and locked away in maximum security facilities around the world were the soldiers who had gone too far, even by wartime standards. Men and women who had committed acts so terrible that their own governments had imprisoned them after the fighting stopped. "If we send regular military, they will fight with honor and discipline," Hassan said slowly. "They will follow the rules of war, protect civilians, and show mercy when appropriate. And they will lose." General Park finished the thought. Because this enemy does not care about honor or rules. Hassan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rebuilt city. Somewhere out there, in facilities hidden from the public, were soldiers who frightened their own people. War criminals, monsters in human skin, the people humanity locked away because they were too dangerous to live freely in peacetime. We have an opportunity here, Hassan said. The galaxy sees us as primitives, as barbarians. They quarantined us out of fear. Now they come begging for help. You are thinking about the brigade, Kovac said, his voice dropping. The Black Star Brigade. The room went cold. Everyone knew about the Black Star Brigade, even if the details were classified. They were the soldiers from the worst prisons, the ones who had done things that made hardened generals look away in disgust. Murderers, yes, but effective ones. Soldiers who had forgotten how to lose because losing meant death and they refused to die. If we send them, there is no going back, General Park warned. The galaxy will see what we are truly capable of. They will fear us even more. Good, Hassan said. Let them fear us. Let them understand what it means to wake sleeping monsters. They asked for soldiers. We will send them the monsters we fear most. The orders went out that night. Around Earth, prison commanders received the same message. All soldiers in the Black Star Brigade program were to be prepared for immediate deployment. No details were given about the mission. None were needed. These soldiers had one purpose: to win wars that nobody else could. In a facility beneath the Antarctic ice, Commander Tay received the notification on his cell screen. He had been imprisoned for 3 years, locked away for actions during the siege of New Moscow that remained classified. He read the message twice, then smiled for the first time in months. War was calling again. And this time, nobody would tell him to hold back. Across the planet, 499 other soldiers received the same message. Some laughed. Some cried. Some simply nodded, having known this day would come. They were the damned, the cursed, the ones humanity had tried to forget. Now they would be heroes again, even if they had to be monsters first. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Earth was sending something far worse. And the Vrick swarm would learn what it meant to face humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Thresh 9, the main staging world for galactic forces. Inside the cargo bay, 500 human soldiers stood in perfect silence. They wore black armor with no insignia, no rank markers, nothing to identify them except the words Black Star Brigade stenciled in white on their shoulders. Commander Tay stood at the front, watching the landing countdown. He was 42 years old but looked 60. Prison had aged him, or maybe it was the memories. His hands were steady, though. They were always steady. That was what made him so dangerous. 2 minutes to landing, Captain Hana announced from beside him. She was younger, only 35, but her eyes held the same deadness. She had held the city of Busan for 6 days against an army that should have crushed her forces in hours. The official report said she used unconventional defensive tactics. The classified report used different words. Words like war crime and never again. The ship landed with a heavy thud. The rear ramp lowered and bright alien sunlight flooded the cargo bay. Tay walked down first, his boots crunching on the purple grass of this strange world. Waiting for him was a reception committee of alien officers, all standing at rigid attention. Ambassador Velcor stepped forward, his crystalline body catching the light. Commander Tay, welcome to Thresh 9. We are grateful for Earth's assistance in this terrible war. Tay saluted, a crisp military gesture that made some of the aliens flinch. They had seen recordings of human soldiers. They knew what those hands could do. We are here to stop the Vricks, Tay said simply. Point us at the enemy. First, there are briefings, integration with our forces, tactical reviews, Velcor began. But Tay cut him off. With respect, Ambassador. We read the briefings during the flight. We know the enemy. We know your tactics. They haven't worked. That is why we are here. The alien officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was not how things were done in the galactic military. There were protocols, procedures, chains of command. But Velcor had pushed for the humans to be brought in. He had to trust them, even if everything about them made his crystalline structure ache with unease. Very well, Velcor said. Let me introduce you to your liaison officers. Over the next hour, the human soldiers were processed into the galactic military system. Medical scans revealed things that horrified the alien doctors. Neural suppressors that had been surgically implanted and then removed, leaving scar tissue. chemical residue from combat stimulants that should have killed them, bone density that suggested multiple high-impact injuries that had somehow healed. These were not normal soldiers. These were not even normal humans. Lieutenant Dae-hyun sat in the medical bay while a Maneri doctor ran scans on his brain. The doctor's telepathic presence touched his mind gently, then recoiled in shock. "What did I see?" the doctor asked, her voice trembling. "What was that memory?" "Which one?" Dae-hyun replied calmly. "I have a lot of bad memories. The city. The last stand." "How did you survive?" Dae-hyun smiled without humor. "My entire platoon was killed in the first hour. I was alone for 6 days. You do what you have to do to survive." "But the things you did, I know what I did," Dae-hyun said quietly. "That is why I was in prison." But the mission succeeded. The city was held. Sometimes survival requires becoming something you hate. Similar conversations happened across the base. Sergeant Nari's psychological profile made 3 different alien psychiatrists refuse to continue the evaluation. Private Hun casually mentioned holding a position against overwhelming odds, and when pressed for details, described tactics that violated every galactic convention of warfare. In the command center, the alien generals watched recordings of human training exercises. The footage showed the brigade running combat drills that were designed to be impossible. Soldiers fighting until they collapsed from exhaustion, then being revived and forced to continue. Mock battles with live ammunition. Scenarios with no winning solution that the humans somehow survived through sheer stubborn refusal to die. "This is insane," Commander Thess growled. "They train their soldiers to ignore death itself." "Not ignore," Velcor corrected. "They train them to function despite it. There is a difference." The briefing that evening was tense. The alien commanders presented their battle plans, showing carefully coordinated defensive positions, fallback points, and reinforcement schedules. Commander Tae listened politely, then pulled up his own tactical display. "This is our approach," he said, marking aggressive push points directly into Vrick's territory. "We will not hold defensive positions. We will attack." "That is suicide," a Gorath general objected. "The Vricks outnumber us 20-1 in those sectors." "Yes," Tae agreed. "Which is why they will not expect it." "You will be slaughtered, maybe," Tae said. "But we will take a lot of them with us. And the Vricks will learn something new. They will learn fear." Captain Hanna stepped forward, expanding the tactical map. "The Vricks operate on hive mind principles. They share information instantly. If we make them fear us in one battle, every Vricks will know it. Fear spreads faster than soldiers." "The Vricks do not feel fear," Velcor said. "That is their advantage." "Everything feels fear," Hanna replied. "They just have not met something scary enough yet." The debate lasted for hours. The alien commanders insisted the human tactics were too aggressive, too risky, too brutal. The humans listened patiently, then ignored every objection. Finally, Velcor called for silence. "You asked Earth for help," he reminded the room. "Earth sent these soldiers. We must trust them to do what they were trained to do." "And what exactly were they trained to do?" Commander Thess demanded. Tae looked the massive Gorath warrior directly in the eyes. "To win, no matter the cost. No matter what we have to become. You fight wars to minimize casualties and preserve honor. We fight wars to end them. There is a difference." That night, the human soldiers prepared their equipment. Private Rena, the youngest member of the brigade at 23, cleaned her rifle for the 4th time. Beside her, Corporal Wu checked his ammunition pouches with mechanical precision. "You nervous?" Rena asked. "Always," Wu replied. "Fear keeps you sharp. It is when you stop being afraid that you die." "I heard you fought at New Seoul." Wu paused, his hands going still. "I did." "They say you held the line when everyone else ran." "We did not run because there was nowhere to run to," Wu said quietly. "We held because holding was all we had left. You do not become a hero by choosing to be brave. You become a hero by refusing to have any other option." Across the camp, similar conversations happened. Veterans sharing stories that would never appear in official reports. Sergeant Junho describing how his squad survived being cut off behind enemy lines for 2 weeks. Specialist Yuna explaining the fine art of making explosives from materials that should not explode. These were not soldiers who fought for glory. They were soldiers who fought because they had forgotten how to do anything else. In his quarters, Commander Tae reviewed the latest intelligence on Vrick's movements. They were planning a major assault on Karesh Station within 48 hours. The galactic forces were preparing defensive positions. It would not be enough. The Vrix would overwhelm them through sheer numbers, but the Vrix had never fought humans before. They had never encountered an enemy that studied their tactics, learned their patterns, and adapted with cold precision. They had never faced soldiers who viewed death not as an ending, but as an inconvenience to be delayed as long as possible. Tay pulled up the deployment orders and began making changes. The alien commanders would not like his plan. They would call it reckless, suicidal, barbaric. They would be right on all counts. But it would work. It had to work. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Earth had sent monsters. And monsters did not fight fair. They fought to win. Tomorrow, the Vrix would learn what it meant to face humanity's finest warriors, not the noble soldiers who fought with honor. Not the peaceful explorers who wanted to join the galactic community. Tomorrow, the Vrix would face the monsters that humans locked away in the dark, the monsters that humans themselves feared, and the galaxy would finally understand why Earth had been quarantined in the first place. The alarms started screaming at Oro 400 hours. On every screen in Koresh Station, the same horrifying image appeared. A wall of Vrix ships, thousands strong, emerging from faster-than-light travel. The swarm had arrived. All forces to defensive positions, the station commander ordered. Across the massive orbital facility, soldiers from a dozen species rushed to their assigned posts. The ETH formed shimmering plasma barriers at key choke points. The Gorath warriors took positions where their strength would be most effective. The Minari coordinators linked minds, preparing to direct the defense with perfect communication. In Section 7, the human Black Star Brigade was not at their assigned defensive position. They were gone. "Where are your soldiers?" Commander Thess demanded, finding Captain Hana in what should have been an empty armory. "Where they need to be," Hana replied, loading magazines into her vest with practiced efficiency. Commander Tay does not believe in defensive positions. He was ordered to hold Section 7. "He is holding it," Hana said calmly. "Just not from inside the station." Outside Koresh Station, in the cold vacuum of space, Commander Tay and 40 human soldiers drifted in zero gravity. They wore heavy assault suits and carried enough explosives to destroy a small ship. They were not inside the station. They were hiding among the exterior hull structures, waiting. "Enemy landing craft approaching," Lieutenant Daehyun reported over the comm. 2 minutes to contact. "Hold position," Tay ordered. "Let them think we are following their playbook." The Vrix attack followed their standard pattern. Wave after wave of landing craft smashed into the station's docking bays. Vrix warriors poured out, their insectoid bodies moving with frightening speed. The galactic defenders opened fire, and the battle began exactly as it always did. The Vrix pushed forward. The defenders held the line. Everything was predictable, until the first Vrix landing craft exploded from the inside. Tay and his team had breached the hull mid-flight, entering the craft before it even docked. In the confined space, they moved like ghosts. Controlled bursts of gunfire, precise knife work. The Vrix inside never knew what killed them. The craft drifted, dead in space, and exploded when Specialist Yuna triggered the charges. "Target 2 acquired," Corporal Wu reported, his team already cutting through another landing craft's hull. The Vrix had never encountered an enemy that attacked their reinforcements mid-transit. They had never fought soldiers who refused to wait for the enemy to come to them. Confusion rippled through the hive mind. Unknown variables. Unexpected tactics. For the first time in their expansion across 17 systems, the Vrix paused. That pause was all Ty needed. All teams, aggressive advance. Make them react to us. Inside the station, the defenders watched in shock as the Vrix assault faltered. Enemy forces that should have been overwhelming them were pulling back, redirecting to deal with threats they could not identify. The perfect coordination of the hive mind was breaking down, trying to adapt to something it had never experienced. "What are the humans doing?" Velcor demanded, watching the tactical displays. "Winning," Captain Hana replied. She activated her comm. "All internal teams advance on my mark. We push now while they are confused." Sergeant Nari led the interior assault with cold precision. Her team moved through the station corridors not like defenders but like hunters. They used hit-and-run tactics appearing from ventilation. Shafts and maintenance tunnels, striking fast and disappearing before the Vrix could respond. Private Hyun found himself cut off from his squad, surrounded by 6 Vrix warriors. Any normal soldier would have tried to retreat, to call for backup. Hyun did neither. He charged forward into the middle of them, firing his weapon until it clicked empty, then switched to his combat knife. When Sergeant Junho's team found him 3 minutes later, Hyun was still standing. All 6 Vriks were dead. "You are bleeding from 7 different wounds," Junho said, looking at the younger soldier. 8, Hyun corrected, touching his side. "But I can still move." The mission continues. This was the difference. The Galactic soldiers fought bravely and skillfully, but they understood when to retreat, when survival was more important than holding position. The human soldiers had no such understanding. They fought until they won or until they physically could not continue. There was no middle ground. In the station's command center, the alien commanders watched the battle unfold with growing horror and fascination. The tactical display showed the Vriks assault collapsing sector by sector. Not because they were being pushed back by superior force, but because they were being hunted. The humans were doing something the Vriks had never experienced. They were making the swarm afraid. "Section 12 is overrun," a Minari coordinator reported. "Vriks forces are breaking through." "Reroute forces to contain," Velcor began. But Captain Hana was already moving. "I have it," she said simply, grabbing her rifle and running toward Section 12. She arrived to find 20 Vriks warriors pouring through a breach in the station's hull. The defending ETH soldiers were pulling back in good order, preparing a secondary defensive line. Hana did not join them. She advanced alone, directly into the Vriks. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations. Hana moved through the Vriks like a force of nature, using every corner, every piece of cover, every angle of fire with perfect efficiency. She was not just skilled. She was something else entirely, something that frightened even her own species. When the other soldiers arrived to support her, all 20 Vriks were dead. Hana was reloading her weapon with mechanical precision, her armor covered in green ichor and her own blood. She had taken 4 major injuries and was still standing. "Section 12 is secure," she reported calmly, proceeding to Section 13. "Captain, you need medical attention?" Velcor said over the comm. "After the battle," Hana replied. "The enemy is still here." In orbit, Commander Tay's team had destroyed 6 landing craft and was working on a 7th. The Vriks were adapting, sending escorts to protect their transports, but it did not matter. The humans adapted faster. They changed tactics every engagement, never repeating the same approach twice. "They are pulling back," Lieutenant Daehyun reported, watching the Vriks fleet begin to withdraw. "We are winning." "No," Tay corrected. "They are regrouping." This was just a probe. The real assault comes next. But something had changed. The Vriks communications, monitored by the Minari telepaths, showed something unprecedented. The hive mind was processing new data, danger assessment, threat evaluation. For the first time in recorded history, the Vriks were categorizing an enemy as high risk. They were learning to fear. The battle ended after 6 hours. Koresh Station held with minimal galactic casualties. The Vriks lost 60% of their assault force. It was a complete victory. But the alien commanders looked at the aftermath with mixed emotions. In the medical bay, human soldiers sat with injuries that should have killed them. Private Rena had a broken arm and 3 cracked ribs, but refused sedation because she might be needed. Corporal Wu had 2nd-degree burns across his back and was already cleaning his weapon for the next engagement. These were not normal soldiers. These were something else. Medical Officer Minji moved among the wounded, administering treatment with calm efficiency. She had been a combat medic during the Unification Wars. She had seen worse. "How are they still functioning?" an ETH doctor asked, watching Minji treat a soldier with massive trauma who should have been unconscious from shock. "Pain suppressors, adrenaline management, psychological conditioning," Minji explained. "During the wars, we learned how to keep soldiers fighting far past normal human limits. It is not enhancement. It is just pushing past what the mind thinks is possible. That is horrifying." "Yes," Minji agreed, "but it works." In the command center, Velcor reviewed the battle recordings. He watched Commander Tay breach enemy ships in vacuum. He watched Captain Hana fight alone against impossible odds. He watched human soldiers do things that should not be possible, driven by something the galactic species had lost long ago. The willingness to become monsters to protect others. "They saved us," Commander Thess admitted reluctantly. "Their tactics are brutal, horrifying, but effective." "They did exactly what we asked them to do," Velcor said quietly. "We asked them to stop the Vriks, We did not ask them to do it nicely. This is what human warfare looks like when all limits are removed. What have we unleashed? A Minari officer whispered. Nobody answered. Because they all knew. They had unleashed the monsters humanity kept locked away, the soldiers too dangerous for peacetime, the warriors who frightened their own kind, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks after the Battle of Koresh Station, the war had changed. The Vrix were no longer using their standard assault patterns. They attacked in smaller groups from unexpected angles with new tactics. The hive mind was learning, and it was learning to fear the humans. But learning came with a price. The Vrix became more aggressive, more desperate. They threw larger forces at human positions, accepting massive casualties to try to overwhelm them. The galaxy had never seen the swarm fight with such fury. Commander Tay stood in the command center reviewing casualty reports. 12 human soldiers dead in the last week. 37 wounded badly enough to require evacuation. The brigade was taking losses, but they were inflicting 10 times that damage on the enemy. We need to implement Protocol Nightfall, Tay said to the assembled commanders. The room went silent. Even the other human officers looked uncomfortable. Protocol Nightfall was a series of tactics developed during the worst days of the Unification Wars. Psychological warfare. Night raids. Hunter-killer operations deep behind enemy lines. It was effective but brutal in ways that made career soldiers question their humanity. The Galactic Council specifically forbids those tactics, Velcor stated. They violate every convention of warfare we have established. Then you should not have asked for our help, Tay replied calmly. You wanted us to stop the Vrix. These tactics will break them. But they are not pretty. I cannot authorize this, Velcor said. Then do not, Tay said. Look away if you must, but we will do what is necessary. That night, despite the official refusal, the brigade began implementing Protocol Nightfall. Lieutenant Gina led the first deep raid, taking her team 3 systems into Vrix-controlled space. They moved through enemy territory like ghosts, attacking supply lines and communication nodes. But more than physical damage, they left messages. Bodies arranged in patterns that confused the hive mind. Equipment that was damaged but left functional, making the Vrix question what was sabotaged and what was not. The hive mind had perfect communication, but that made it vulnerable. When one Vrix saw something that created fear, every Vrix knew about it instantly. Gina understood this. She made sure every raid left something for the Vrix to fear. On the 4th night, her team was ambushed. 17 Vrix warriors surrounded them in a narrow canyon on a dead moon. Any normal military unit would have tried to break through the encirclement. Gina attacked directly into the thickest concentration of enemies. She moved through them with her combat knife, her rifle slung on her back. In close quarters, guns were less effective than steel in training. She took 17 wounds during the fight. Each one that should have slowed her down, should have stopped her. She ignored them all. When Sergeant Junho's rescue team arrived 30 minutes later, Gina was still standing. All 17 Vrix were dead. You need immediate medical evacuation, Junho said, looking at her injuries. After we complete the mission, Gina replied, her voice steady despite the pain. We have 2 more targets tonight. Stories like this spread through both armies. The galactic forces whispered about the human who refused to die. The Vrix, for the first time in their existence, began showing avoidance behavior. When sensors detected Lieutenant Gina's team, Vrix forces would sometimes withdraw rather than engage. Sergeant Siak became another legend. He was assigned to hold a narrow bridge on a contested world. His orders were to delay the enemy for 2 hours while civilians evacuated. He held it for 8 hours, alone. His team had been killed in the first assault, but Siak refused to abandon his position. When relief forces finally arrived, they found him still standing at his post, surrounded by dead Vrix, out of ammunition and fighting with salvaged enemy weapons. Why did you not retreat when your team died? The rescue commander asked. Because my orders were to hold this position, Siak replied. I was not given orders to retreat. This was the frightening thing about the brigade. They took orders literally. If told to hold a position, they held it until they died or until new orders arrived. There was no self-preservation instinct that overrode their missions. They had been trained, conditioned, or broken in ways that removed that fundamental survival response. The psychological effect was devastating. The Vrix hive mind began allocating more resources to tracking human movements. Battle plans were modified to avoid areas where humans operated. For a species that had conquered 17 systems through overwhelming force, the humans represented something new, an enemy that could not be overwhelmed because they refused to acknowledge the concept of being overwhelmed. But the cost was becoming clear to the galactic forces. Private Rena, who had been so young and nervous when she arrived, now moved with the mechanical efficiency of a combat veteran. She no longer smiled. She no longer showed emotion at all. Something inside her had broken and been replaced with something colder, something more effective. Corporal Wu developed a reputation for extreme precision. He could estimate enemy positions with uncanny accuracy, set ambushes that caught Vrix forces completely by surprise, and make split-second decisions that saved lives. But when he slept, which was rarely, he had nightmares that made him wake up screaming. The other soldiers understood. They all had their own demons. Ambassador Velcor found Captain Hana alone in an observation deck, looking out at the stars. She had been promoted to major after her actions at Koresh Station, but she still wore the same battle-worn armor. "I wanted to ask you something," Velcor said, his crystalline body reflecting the starlight. "What are you? What makes humans capable of such things?" Hana was quiet for a long moment. "We are not stronger than your soldiers. Not faster. Not smarter. But we have something you lack. We have the ability to push past every limit, every boundary, every instinct that tells us to stop. We can make ourselves into monsters when necessary. But at what cost?" "Everything," Hana replied. "We lose ourselves. We become things that frighten our own people. That is why we were in prison. We went too far. We became too good at being monsters. Then why do it again?" "Because you needed monsters," Hana said simply. "And because maybe, just maybe, if we save the galaxy, we can prove we are still human underneath. We can be heroes even if we have to be monsters first." 2 days later, the Vrix launched their largest assault yet. They hit 3 systems simultaneously, throwing everything they had at the galactic forces. It was a desperate gambit. Break through now or risk being ground down by the human tactics. Commander Tay received the reports and made his decision immediately. "All forces prepare for counter-assault. We are not defending. We attack." "That is insane," a Gorath general protested. "They outnumber us 5-1 in each system." "Then we will have to be 5 times as effective," Tay replied. The entire brigade, all 500 soldiers, volunteered for the counter-assault. Even the wounded who could barely stand requested to be included. Private Rena, barely recovered from her broken ribs, insisted on joining her squad. When the medical officer tried to stop her, she said something that summarized the entire brigade's philosophy. "If I stay behind while my team fights, I am useless. If I go and die fighting, at least I died for something. There is no third option." The preparations began immediately. The humans checked their weapons with ritual precision. They wrote messages to be sent home if they did not return. They said quiet goodbyes to the alien soldiers who had fought beside them, knowing many would not survive the coming battle. That night, Commander Tay recorded a message to Earth. His words would later be studied in every military academy in the galaxy. "We are about to launch an assault that will likely kill most of us. We do this not because we are brave, but because we refuse to have any other option. The galaxy asked Earth for soldiers. You sent us. We are the monsters you feared, the criminals you locked away, the soldiers who went too far. But we are still human, and humans protect those who cannot protect themselves. If we must become monsters to save the innocent, then we will be the worst monsters this galaxy has ever seen." He paused, looking into the camera. "Tell Earth we remembered how to be heroes, even if we had to be monsters first." The counter-assault launched at dawn. 500 human soldiers against the largest Vrix force ever assembled. The aliens watched in horror and fascination as the brigade threw themselves into impossible odds with no hesitation, no fear, no doubt. They were going to win or die trying. For the Black Star Brigade, there was no difference between those two outcomes. Both were acceptable. Both were honorable. Both were human. The Vrix home cluster was a nightmare made real. 17 planets covered in organic structures that pulsed like living tissue. The hive mind's presence was so strong that even non-telepathic species could feel it pressing against their thoughts. This was the heart of the swarm, the center of everything that had consumed so many worlds, and 500 human soldiers were flying directly into it. "This is insane," Commander Thess said. watching the tactical display. They will be slaughtered. Perhaps, Velcor replied quietly. Or perhaps they will teach the Vrix what fear truly means. Commander Tay stood in the lead transport, watching his soldiers prepare. After 3 months of constant combat, they looked more like ghosts than humans. Thin, scarred, exhausted, but their weapons were clean. Their armor was functional, and their eyes held that same cold determination. They were going to win or die. Nothing else mattered. Listen up, Tay said, his voice carrying through the transport. The Queen Mind is on the 3rd planet. Kill it and the entire Vrix network collapses. They will have no coordination, no strategy, no purpose. They become just animals. That is our mission. We are going to die doing this, Private Hyun said. It was not a question. Most of us, yes, Tay agreed. But some will survive. Some will complete the mission. That is enough. The transports hit atmosphere at maximum speed, punching through Vrix air defenses through sheer momentum. They crashed more than landed. The impact killing 10 soldiers instantly. But the rest were already moving, pouring out of the wreckage with weapons firing. The Vrix responded with overwhelming force. Thousands of warriors swarmed toward the landing sites. The humans did not try to hold defensive positions. They attacked directly toward the Queen Mind's location, fighting forward with mechanical efficiency. Lieutenant Gina died in the first hour, taking 30 Vrix with her. She held a choke point alone while her team advanced, refusing to fall even when her body had taken too much damage to continue. She died standing, her finger still on the trigger. Sergeant Siok made it 3 kilometers before a Vrix warrior caste caught him in open ground. He fought them hand to hand when his ammunition ran out, killing 5 before they overwhelmed him. His last words over the comm were, "Keep moving. Complete the mission." One by one, the human soldiers fell. But each death bought time, bought distance, bought victory for those still fighting. They were not trying to survive. They were trying to win. There was a difference. Captain Hana led the main assault force, pushing through Vrix defenses with brutal efficiency. She took a wound that should have killed her in the 2nd hour, but kept fighting through sheer willpower. When her weapon was destroyed, she picked up a fallen Vrix claw weapon and kept advancing. "Major, you need to fall back," Corporal Wu said, seeing her injuries. "No," Hana replied. "We are close." I can feel it. She was right. The Queen Mind structure loomed ahead, a massive organic tower that pulsed with bioelectric energy. Around it, the Vrix defenders fought with desperate fury. They knew what would happen if the humans reached their queen. Specialist Yuna planted explosives as they advanced, creating a path of destruction behind them. She made it to the base of the Queen Mind structure before a Vrix warrior tore through her armor. With her last strength, she armed all her remaining explosives and triggered them. The resulting explosion opened a breach in the structure's defenses. Through the breach, Commander Tay ordered, "Now!" The survivors charged through. 50 humans had made it this far. Then 40. Then 30. The Vrix threw everything at them, but the humans refused to stop. They were beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond reason. They were pure momentum, pure violence, pure will. Commander Tay, Captain Hana, Lieutenant Daehyun, Sergeant Junho, Corporal Wu, and Private Rina were the last 6 to reach the Queen Mind chamber. The massive creature filled the room, its mind touching theirs with crushing psychic force. Most species would have collapsed under that mental assault. The humans ignored it. "Spread out," Tay ordered. "Hit it from all sides." The Queen Mind screamed in every Vrix mind across the galaxy. It threw warrior casts at the humans, biological defenses, psychic attacks. Nothing worked. The 6 soldiers moved with perfect coordination, exploiting every weakness, pressing every advantage. Corporal Wu died taking down a warrior caste that would have killed Rina. Sergeant Junho held the entrance alone, ensuring no reinforcements could enter. Lieutenant Daehyun used the last of his explosives to destroy the Queen Mind's primary defense organs. In the end, it came down to 3. Commander Tay, Captain Hana, and Private Rina. They stood before the Queen Mind, exhausted, bleeding, barely able to stand. The creature tried one last psychic assault, pushing images of failure and death into their minds. "We have already died 1,000 times, Tay said. You cannot frighten us with death." They fired their weapons until they were empty, then used knives, then used their bare hands if needed. The Queen Mind fell slowly, its massive body collapsing as the hive mind network began to shatter. Across 17 systems, Vrix warriors suddenly stopped fighting. Without the Queen Mind's coordination, they became confused, directionless, lost. The war was over. Private Rena sat among the ruins, too exhausted to move. She was 23 years old and had killed more enemies than most soldiers did in entire careers. She looked at her hands and wondered if she would ever feel clean again. "We did it," she said quietly. "Yes," Commander Tay replied. He was wounded in 6 places but still standing. "We did." Of the 500 soldiers who entered the Vrix home cluster, only 203 survived. The casualties were devastating. Lieutenant Gina, Sergeant Siak, Specialist Yuna, and so many others would never go home. Their bodies would be recovered later, treated with full military honors, but they were gone. The rescue ships arrived 2 hours later. The galactic forces found the human survivors sitting among the carnage, too tired to celebrate, too broken to feel relief. They had won. They had saved the galaxy, but the cost was measured in monsters' blood. The journey back to Thresh 9 was quiet. The survivors did not speak much. What was there to say? They had become the things they feared most about themselves. They had proven that humans could be monsters when necessary. The galaxy was saved, but at what cost to their own humanity? The Galactic Council wanted to honor them. Medals, ceremonies, speeches about heroism and sacrifice. Commander Tay refused all of it. "We did not do this for glory," he told Ambassador Velcor. "We did this because you needed it done. We are not heroes. We are soldiers who did our job." "You saved billions of lives," Velcor insisted. "And killed thousands to do it," Tay replied. "Do not make us into something we are not. We are the monsters humanity locked away. You needed monsters. We answered the call. That is all." Earth's response was different. President Hassan personally met the returning transport. When Commander Tay walked down the ramp, Hassan saluted him, not as a president, but as one soldier to another. "Welcome home," Hassan said simply. "Are we going back to prison?" Tay asked. "No," Hassan replied. "You have earned your freedom. All of you have." The survivors were given full pardons, new identities if they wanted them, and support to rebuild their lives. Some accepted, some did not. How do you return to normal life after becoming a monster? Captain Hana became a teacher working with troubled youth. She never spoke about the war, but sometimes her students would see the scars and ask. She would tell them, everyone has darkness inside them. The trick is learning when to use it and when to keep it locked away. Sergeant Junho started a veterans outreach program, helping soldiers readjust to civilian life. He understood what it meant to carry the weight of necessary violence. He helped others carry that weight too. Specialist Yuna's family learned of her death with pride and grief. She had been a monster when the galaxy needed monsters, but she had also been their daughter, their sister, their friend. They buried her with full honors, and her name was carved on the memorial along with all the others who did not return. Private Rena struggled the most. She was too young to have become what she became. She spent years in therapy, trying to reconcile the girl she had been with the soldier she had become. Eventually, she found peace working in disaster relief, helping instead of hurting. Commander Tay never really readjusted. He lived quietly in a small house by the ocean, working as a fisherman. Sometimes tourists would recognize him and ask for pictures or autographs. He always refused. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had done terrible things for good reasons. 10 years after the war, memorial services honored the fallen of the Black Star Brigade. Captain Hana attended, as did Sergeant Junho, Private Rena, and dozens of other survivors. They stood in silence, remembering friends who had become monsters alongside them. "Do you regret it?" Rena asked Tay as they stood before the memorial wall. "Every day," Tay replied, "but I would do it again if I had to. That is what makes us human. We carry the weight of our choices, good and bad, and we keep moving forward." The galaxy never forgot the Black Star Brigade. Stories spread among younger species. Tales of the human soldiers who hunted the hunters. The stories always ended the same way. Be grateful they are on our side, and pray they stay that way. The Galactic Council established new protocols after the war. Never provoke humanity. Never threaten Earth. Never ask what happened during their unification wars, and never ever ask them to send their monsters again. Because humanity would answer that call, and the cost would be measured in more than blood. Commander Tay stood on Earth looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued. Species lived in peace because humans had been willing to become monsters. It was not a happy ending. There was no such thing for soldiers like him. But it was an ending. The war was over. The monsters could rest for now, because Tay knew the truth that the galaxy was learning. Humanity was not peaceful because they lacked the capacity for violence. Humanity was peaceful because they understood exactly what violence cost. They had seen their own monsters. They had been those monsters. And they chose peace despite that, or perhaps because of it. The galaxy asked for soldiers. Humanity sent the monsters they fear most. Those monsters saved everyone. And then, because they were human, those monsters tried to become human again. Some succeeded. Some did not. But they all tried. And that, in the end, was what made them heroes. Not the violence they were capable of, but the humanity they fought to preserve despite it.